So who is Nancy Guthrie? What's going on with that story?
So Nancy Guthrie is the mum of a really famous television presenter, journalist, Savannah Guthrie in the US. She presents NBC's Today. She's on primetime telly in the United States, which is why this case, well, one of the reasons why this case has got so much attention, and she's been trying to rally some of that attention too, understandably, because her mum has now been missing for over a month. She's elderly, she has health problems, and what the evidence suggests is that she was abducted in the middle of the night from her home. At first, that she wears a pacemaker, and they thought they might be able to track her for a period of time, but then that wasn't possible. And one of the reasons why this has been popping up all over the place on social media is because there's been some really quite scary viral footage that's been shared. There's this Ring doorbell camera footage was released, and it shows someone in a balaclava. It's really terrifying. And the family had said that they'd pay huge amounts of money for information or for her return, and it was suggested that they were demanding a ransom, the people that had taken Nancy Guthrie. But so far, there really hasn't been, at least outwardly, that much progress in terms of what's gone on here.
So at the heart of this, there's incredibly tragic story of, a family who've lost their elderly mother who has a pacemaker, and they're probably terrified. But as far as the internet's concerned, this has all the hallmarks of a true crime story. It's a celebrity's family member. It's a mystery. We don't know where they've gone. It seems like a neo-noir or like a kind of Fargo type story. So how has the internet been interpreting this?
Yeah, so particularly disappearances, I would say, and particularly disappearances that become high profile, whether it's because there's a huge amount of kind of publicity around them or because it relates to someone who's well known, they certainly as of late have frequently inspired these frenzies on social media where everyone's looking for answers. And it's kind of human nature, right? You're curious as to what's gone on here. You've got some clues that you can start to piece together, but you don't really know what's happened. You've also got, the police who are dealing with the case, the FBI getting involved as well. And, there's been some criticism over the way that they've handled this. There were suggestions that the crime scene wasn't secured properly, or that that there have been different points where they haven't necessarily been as transparent or as clear as they could have been. And when there's that, they have generally defended their approach to this case. But when you've got that kind of vacuum of information, it's the perfect place for these sleuths or the kind of social media influencers who like posting about true crime to get involved, get stuck in, and to try and essentially kind of participate in what ends up feeling a little bit like a game, I would say. And when it comes to this case, there are some influencers who are just posting updates, information. They're just reading what's coming out of from the authorities or from the family or what have you. But then there are others who are posting stuff that is actively misleading or disinformation. So, for example, the sheriff has cleared the family members as suspects, but nonetheless, there continues to be a huge amount of speculation that members of Nancy Guthrie's family are somehow behind this or linked to it, in spite of what the authorities have said. And then a bandmate of Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law was wrongly named as a person of interest, and that meant that his home got mobbed, essentially, because these aren't just the influencers we're talking about here. Some of them are actually turning up like they're kind of investigators and just filming content close to the crime scene, essentially.
Yeah, I've seen people on TikTok posing outside the house where this horrible thing happened. So have you spoken to any of these influencers? Why are they doing it?
The people that I've chatted to are what I would consider in that kind of middle bucket of they're posting quite a lot of content, often factually accurate, sometimes going down certain routes and rabbit holes. But what's hard in cases like this are we actually don't have the answers about what's happened broadly. We don't know where Nancy Guthrie is or who's taken her right now. So it's hard to kind of outright rule out some of what's being said. The more extreme conspiracy theories we'll get to in a minute. But one of the influencers who I spoke to is this woman called Lindsay Rust Perper. And essentially she kind of aggregates information about the case from her apartment in New York.
I'm back on the case of Nancy Guthrie, and we had a great live tonight. We actually spoke to one of Nancy's neighbors.
I asked her quite a lot about why she's doing this, what is the motivator? And she said that for most of the sleuths and the other people in this ecosystem online, it is about trying to actually solve the case.
Obviously, there are online sleuths that their purpose is to, solve this case. But for me, I think mine is more just aggregated recaps that I was finding all over the internet. And then people started coming to me with, exclusive information. I do think that the people on social media could solve the case. And it's not just my opinion that the organization of this investigation has been poor. And, I think that the FBI and Sheriff's Department could be caught up in an old way of thinking. And I think that there's a lot of people on the internet that are trying to solve this and not for the reward. I think because they are genuinely, they have the means to do it.
However rare, there are some examples where internet sleuths have kind of found out something about a crime.
Yeah, like take, for example, Gabby Petito. Gabby Petito was killed by her boyfriend at the time they were traveling. But they'd obviously posted quite a lot of content on social media. And as a consequence, it meant that people essentially figured out where she'd been killed and where her body was and all of this stuff. And that was a real sort of, I don't know if boost is the right word, but it really turbocharged this social media community because it was an example of where actually we've managed to figure some things out using effectively open source techniques where you're looking at content before the authorities did. And therefore, let's keep doing it because we might get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, and the OG example of that is Don't Fuck With Cats, which obviously kind of idolized the internet sleuth.
And they were trying to find that guy who was killing cats, essentially.
Exactly, and they did, right?
Yeah.
But those cases are very rare. And I think the majority of internet sleuth cases end up being problematic and misled. And we can get into why. But a good example of that is, for example, the Boston Marathon bombing, where the Reddit forum that is devoted to this kind of internet sleuthing, which has, over 1 million subscribers, it's a huge part of the internet, started basically pointing out people in the crowd, and it became kind of like a racist Where's Waldo or Where's Wally, as you call it here.
There you go.
Because it was any kind of non-white person in the crowd pictured, some of them who were identified by Reddit, and then they were sent threatening messages. People showed up outside their homes. So,
and this is one of the huge risks of this kind of social media sleuthing, which is when people are putting out information that is not verified just based on I've spotted this or I've seen this, and then it ends up being a problem. And I asked Lindsay a bit about how she verifies what she's posting.
I've been really, really careful about sharing anything more than what I've heard, directly from a neighbor or that we have confirmed, whether it's through, the FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Department. I really haven't done much of sharing any theories that I have, or I'm getting stuff about psychics or mediums talking about where she is. I'm getting the craziest videos all day long, and I really don't share anything that is not directly from those sources I previously mentioned.
So one of the sources, for example, that she does use is she'll look at kind of flight trackers and radars and that sort of thing and flight logs. And she talks about seeing that a flight had landed at a particular time around the vicinity area where Nancy Guthrie lives, and then it had gone to Mexico, and therefore was Nancy Guthrie in Mexico, and she'd sent that tip off into the FBI, into the authorities. And it's really hard to say, well, hang on, that's misinformation or wrong, because ultimately right now we don't know where she is. So it's almost like the kind of subversion of open source techniques, which are broadly valuable things. People can look at all sorts of publicly available information to piece together stories, in the kind of investigative journalism that both of us do. That's something that happens all the time. But the issue here is that you've got people who are just kind of deciding perhaps to have a crack at it and not and actually when I've investigated other cases of sleuths, people might remember there was a woman called Nicola Bulley who went missing. She died in Lancashire in the UK, and there was this huge frenzy on social media and all kinds of really extreme conspiracy theories. And then also the Idaho murders that happened in the US, these students who got killed in their student house, which was again terrible, and just inspired this whole true crime frenzy of people turning up and that sort of thing. And again, so much misinformation and false accusations about people. I really pushed Lindsay on what happens when, actually the people posting on social media misidentify someone and can effectively ruin their life, tarnish their reputation.
People with really, really big followings are being not as careful about, throwing out the names or their theories of who they think is involved. And that to me is where I don't want to get involved on that level. And I agree, it's wasting time. And to me, what I'm frustrated with is the sheriff or FBI have asked the public to help in finding the perpetrator or the abductor, and they're not giving us some of the important information that we need. And so it is leaving people kind of scrambling and, placing blame in places they shouldn't.
So who else have you spoken to?
So another person I spoke to is this guy called Jordan Roan.
My entry into the Nancy Guthrie investigation has come by way of me being a former criminal prosecutor here in Pennsylvania and working on cases with some of the best detectives in the country and taking cases to trial and having evidence in front of me and analyzing that and really putting the puzzle together.
He posts on TikTok as well, like he's got his mic out, he's analysing stuff, often basing it on legitimate things like Google Trends, for example. So he'll use like open source information to piece things together. The issue is that some of his videos are accurate and analytical. Others really dip into the kind of conspiratorial and more. And I asked him a little bit about, how he ensures that he's not posting things that are inaccurate.
In the world of investigations, of course, there are going to be different leads or theories that turn out to be inaccurate. And I mean, quite frankly, the fact that this case hasn't been solved yet leads me to say confidently that, so far, all the theories are disproven until one of them is proven right. Before any videos go out, before I even film any videos, the information's already been turned over to the FBI. And that gives them the opportunity, I think, to go through the lead, to investigate it on their own. And for instance, I've sent over actual geographic locations that I think that they should search. And I give them the opportunity to go and search that location without having any public interference or people who follow me on TikTok going and disrupting the scene.
But I did also challenge him on, for example, there's this one video he posted where he talks about how Savannah Guthrie, Nancy Guthrie's daughter, had interviewed victims of Jeffrey Epstein. And then he makes all sorts of connections to the fact that might then mean that actually this is powerful people connected to Jeffrey Epstein.
$1 million reward is offered. Crickets. Savannah offers to pay the ransom. We get no proof of life. Why is that? Because whoever's behind this already got paid by the person who ordered the hit. And it wasn't pocket change. We're talking millions from a very wealthy person or entity with deep pockets.
And I really pushed him on this because, it feels like adding together one and one and getting three. And ultimately his perspective is, well, I can just put the information out there and people can make up their own minds.
Law enforcement obviously decides what is actionable and what's not. But I think, silence doesn't help anyone. So we do know that, for instance, with Jeffrey Epstein, actually it was the FBI themselves that released the information, who said that he had bank accounts set up in Grand Junction, Colorado, which happens to be the location that I found 5 different search spikes taking place prior to Nancy's abduction, searching for her address. So I think it's really a responsibility on my part to put information that I find out into the public square and let people analyze and dissect it as they see fit.
To be clear, both of the influencers that I chatted to seem to have, like genuine intentions. They're not people posting like the most extreme disinformation, and they're certainly not the people turning up at the home or invading anyone's privacy, anything like that. Those are the more extreme influencers, but ultimately they all exist as part of this kind of social media sleuth world.
The sleuthing stuff is kind of a microcosm for everything that's wrong with the internet. This impulse to see it as a kind of mystery, as a true crime mystery to solve with clues everywhere, is the same kind of impulse that's led people to come up with QAnon, to, Pizzagate, anti-vax theories. Every conspiracy, people just...
It's so participatory, isn't it?
Yeah, but the idea that like police work is participatory is ludicrous. Like, leave it to the police.
But then I guess, and this is what's difficult about these cases, particularly disappearances, is there's often a real willingness understandably from the family to like publicize this, to get people engaged with it. The downside of that is that everyone gets kind of too engaged, and then you have like false accusations, and then you have people sometimes forgetting at times, not the people I chatted to, but I'd say the wider influencer network, forgetting that this is real people. Like there is a real woman who is currently missing and a family that's hugely affected by that.
Yeah, absolutely. But what is it about the internet? What is it about social media that makes people thrust themselves into this like neo-noir detective
Yeah. It's
role.
kind of like the great, well, I'd say there's two things. It's like the great sort of leveling of social media has contributed to, which is everybody kind of being like, everyone can take part, whoever you are, sitting on your settee, whatever, out and about. You have a mobile phone, you can film content, you can make stuff. And not just that you can make stuff, but point two, that stuff is rewarded. You get views, you get liked, you get engagement. Speaking to both Lindsay and Jordan, they both, kept reiterating, like, for me, this isn't about the views. For me, this isn't about the likes. But then, like, there was a bit where Jordan was like, it's not just about that. And, like, ultimately, you do get a reward in so much as whether it's just the feeling of people viewing and engaging with and liking your content and it's a topic you find interesting, or whether in some cases, and I've met quite a few kind of social media sleuths who've actually been able to monetize their content, like they've basically turned it into a job. They've been able to use the monetization schemes on the different platforms and get money. It's like the company's business models and just like algorithmic models incentivize this kind of behavior. And actually the more extreme and the more outrageous and the if you can come up with a new hot take, you're going to get more engagement.
Have you heard of the Texas sharpshooter fallacy?
Yeah.
Where like it's about a guy shoots like a blank page a bunch of times, then draws the bullseye around it. That's what people are doing. They're basically seeing clusters of unrelated incidents and questions and arranging them into a neat theory.
That's one of the most interesting things about if you look at, so there's been some really interesting research that's been done about the like brains of people that believe conspiracy theories or the kind of attributes that they possess. And one of the things that is, well, there's two really like key indicators. One is like rigidity of thought, so like the inability to adapt what you believe or think based on the evidence in front of you. The other thing is all about like pattern recognition. Like it's basically like spotting, like being almost like too good at pattern recognition, like spotting like patterns where they actually don't exist. The last thing I'd say about these kinds of sleuths and influencers is they're often like really like nice, normal, like, I mean, like they've got kind of quirky hobbies, I guess, but like nice, normal, interesting people. And that is the other issue here, which is I think that social media like desensitizes you to the impact of this content, particularly when it can be negative and defamatory or cause harm. If we post a video and like loads of other people who are interested in this content are like watching it, engaging with it, commenting on it, obviously we think that's normal. Like it's like it changes, it distorts your kind of like perception of what is socially acceptable. And I think that is a huge part of this as well. And why, like someone in your life like could easily get sucked up and involved in all of this stuff in a way that you like maybe wouldn't have expected before.